Well, I promised you part 2 of our other Microsoft apps series a couple of weeks ago, and this is finally it. Hi, this is Annie Rind, your faithful hostess of the 1001 Business Problems Solved with Microsoft Teams podcast. Of course, this podcast has usually focused on Microsoft Teams, and lately we have spent quite a bit of time talking about Copilot. But as I told you in part 1 of this series, there are a lot of other apps sitting inside your Microsoft 365 licenses, and some of them can quietly solve problems you may have been putting up with for years. I'll be going quite a bit longer today than my normal 6 or 7 minutes, because I figured you'd like to have all the apps in a single episode. Don't worry, you can pause it in order to go refill your coffee halfway through. Now, before we start wandering around the Microsoft 365 neighborhood, I want to say this again because it matters. You should always look first at the friction in your business before you start looking at the features in an app. Too many people hear about a tool, run off to YouTube, watch 3 tutorials, and come back overwhelmed because the app can do 47 things and they only needed one of them. That is not progress. That is just a more modern way to feel confused. A better approach is to start with one point of friction. What is wasting time? What is causing repeated mistakes? What are people always chasing, copying, retyping, asking about, or waiting on? Once you know that, you can look at the Microsoft apps through a much more useful lens. You are not asking, what does this app do? You are asking, what kind of friction was this app built to reduce? That is the point of today's episode. I am not going to give you a complete feature tour of every app. Nobody needs me reading Microsoft app descriptions like the side of a cereal box. Instead, I want to walk through several apps and describe the kind of business friction each one may help reduce. You may want to hit pause once in a while and jot something down if one of these sounds like a problem you have been tolerating. First, there is Microsoft Planner. Planner is helpful when tasks are living in too many places. If your team's follow-up items are scattered across emails, meeting notes, hallway conversations, private chats, sticky notes, and somebody's memory, you do not have a task system. You have a scavenger hunt. Planner gives a work group a shared place to track who owns what, when it is due, and whether it is actually moving. That reduces the friction of accountability because people no longer have to ask, who is supposed to do that? Or, did anybody follow up? It also helps because Microsoft has been tying its task tools together more and more over the last few years. A person may see workgroup tasks from Planner alongside personal tasks in Outlook or To Do, which helps reduce the friction of having to check 5 different places just to know what needs attention. And, like many of the apps we are talking about today, Planner can be added to a Teams channel. That matters because everything needs a home. If the plan supports a specific team, process, project, or department, put it where that work already happens. Next, there is Microsoft Forms. Forms reduces the friction of collecting information from people. If you have ever sent an email to 10 people asking for responses, then spent the next 3 days digging through replies, copying answers, checking who responded, and trying to figure out which response was the latest one, you already understand why Forms exists. Forms lets you ask the questions once and collect the answers in a consistent format. That may be useful for employees, customers, vendors, volunteers, workshop attendees, or anyone else from whom you need information. For simple needs, the results can flow into Excel. For more structured needs, the responses can be routed somewhere else, such as a SharePoint list with Power Automate. The point is not that Forms is fancy. The point is that it can remove the aggregation work that happens after an email survey, sign-up request, or information gathering message goes out. If the pain is I keep asking people for the same information and then manually sorting the answers, Forms may be the tool that reduces that pain. Speaking of Power Automate and lists, those are 2 of our favorites. Power Automate reduces the friction of repetitive handoffs. Now, I will say right up front that Power Automate is a little more advanced than some of the other tools we are talking about today. But it can be incredibly useful when the same thing keeps happening over and over again. If someone fills out a form and then another person has to copy the response into a spreadsheet, notify a supervisor, create a folder, send a confirmation email, or start an approval process, there may be automation potential. Power Automate is not magic, and it should not be used to automate a bad process before anyone understands it. But when the process is clear and the repeated manual steps are predictable, it can reduce a lot of tedious work. Sometimes the best use of automation is not replacing people. It is saving good people from becoming human copy and paste machines. Now let's talk about Microsoft Lists. If I had to pick a favorite app from today's episode, it would probably be Lists. That will surprise absolutely no one who has listened to this podcast for long. The simplest way to explain lists is that they are like browser-based spreadsheets with a much stronger backend. That is not a perfect definition, but it is close enough for a business conversation. Lists reduce the friction that happens when multiple people are trying to track real work in a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are wonderful. I am not here to insult Excel. But when a spreadsheet becomes a shared tracker for issues, requests, customers, equipment, inspections, renewals, incidents, tasks, or approvals, it often starts to wobble. People sort it differently. Someone hides a row. Someone changes a column. Someone forgets to update the status. Someone saves a copy with final, really final in the file name, and now nobody knows which version matters. A list gives that tracked information a better home. You can create columns, views, filters, groupings, formatting, and workflows around the information. You can show people only what they need to see. You can keep the data in one place instead of passing a spreadsheet around like a hot potato. It is also worth saying that Microsoft Lists and SharePoint Lists are basically the same thing under the hood. I still tend to think in terms of SharePoint lists because I want workgroup information to live in the right workgroup home, but the Lists app gives people a unified doorway into the same kind of capability. If your friction is, we are tracking important things in a spreadsheet, but it keeps getting messy, Lists may deserve a very serious look. Next, there is Bookings. Bookings reduces the friction of scheduling. You know the kind of friction I mean. What do you have open Tuesday? I can do Tuesday morning. Well, Tuesday morning is now gone. How about Wednesday? Wednesday works if it is after lunch. Never mind, I just got booked. That little back and forth may not seem like a big deal, but multiply it across sales calls, consultations, office hours, service appointments, interviews, customer check-ins, or internal meetings, and it becomes a surprising amount of wasted motion. Bookings let someone choose from available times based on the rules you set. It integrates with Outlook, which means you are not asking people to guess when you are free. This can be especially useful when the scheduling pattern is repeatable. If people often need to book the same kind of meeting with you or your team, Bookings can make the process feel calmer for everybody involved. And yes, I did an entire episode on Bookings way back in the early days of this podcast. I believe the title had something to do with open door policies. Next, there is Loop. Loop reduces the friction of messy thinking. I will be honest. We struggled to understand Loop in the early days because we looked at it and thought, isn't this just another place to make pages? We were wrong. The more useful way to think about Loop is that it gives teams a place to capture work in progress. Not polished information. Not the final official version. Not the carefully structured SharePoint page that everyone will reference later. Loop is more for the thinking while the thinking is still moving. If your team is brainstorming, outlining, planning, collecting ideas, working through a problem, or trying to turn scattered thoughts into something more useful, Loop can be a good fit. It also works well with Copilot because Copilot can help summarize, organize, and reshape that messy thinking. You can also add components, such as task lists or planner-related items, so that ideas do not just sit there looking thoughtful. They can start turning into follow-up work. A simple way to say it is this: SharePoint pages are often better for structured, more finalized information. Loop pages are often better for active thinking that has not fully landed yet. If the friction is we have good thoughts, but they are scattered across chats, meeting notes, and somebody's head, Loop may help give those thoughts a temporary home while you shape them into something useful. Then there is Shifts. Shifts reduces scheduling and frontline coordination friction. If you have employees working different shifts, covering different roles, swapping schedules, clocking in and out, or needing mobile access to their schedule, shifts may be worth looking at. For some organizations, scheduling lives in a third-party system, and that may be exactly right. But for smaller or simpler operations, shifts can help reduce the friction of managing who is working when, who requested time off, who swapped a shift, and whether people can see the schedule without calling somebody. It can also help with time-related information because employees can use clock-in and clock-out functionality, and hours can be exported for review or payroll-related work if the organization does not already have a better system in place. The friction here is not glamorous. It is the everyday coordination pain of making sure the right people know when they are supposed to work and supervisors are not constantly answering the same schedule questions. Next, let's talk about Stream. Stream reduces the friction of video knowledge getting buried. A lot of organizations have training videos, meeting recordings, demonstrations, or explanation videos scattered all over the place. One person has a recording in OneDrive. Someone else has a training clip in a Teams chat. Another video was shared once in an email, and now nobody knows where it went. Stream is the Microsoft 365 video experience. It is not just a place where videos sit. It can help make video content easier to organize, find, and reuse. For training, that can be very useful. If you have repeated explanations, safety videos, software demonstrations, onboarding videos, or process instructions, video may save a lot of repeated human explaining. Stream can also be connected back into Teams and SharePoint so the videos are near the work they support. That is important. A training video that technically exists, but nobody can find might as well be buried in the backyard. Now let's talk about Power BI. Power BI reduces the friction of understanding metrics. Many organizations have data, but they do not really have visibility. Their numbers may be sitting in Excel files, exported reports, accounting systems, operational systems, or a pile of spreadsheets that only one person knows how to interpret. That creates management friction because leaders are trying to make decisions without clear, timely, useful views of the information. Power BI is more advanced to set up than many of the other apps we have discussed, but it can be very powerful when the organization needs to analyze data, spot trends, compare performance, or keep key metrics in front of people. The goal is not to make pretty charts for the sake of pretty charts. The goal is to reduce the friction between the raw data and the decision that needs to be made. And like many of these tools, Power BI can be displayed in Teams and SharePoint. That means dashboards can live closer to the people and processes they are supposed to support. If the friction is we have the numbers, but nobody can see what they mean quickly enough, Power BI may be the right tool to explore. The final app to cover today is Walkie Talkie. Walkie Talkie reduces quick communication friction for frontline or job site work. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a push-to-talk communication tool inside Teams. That can be handy for people who are moving around, working with their hands, or needing quick voice communication without starting a formal call. Now, I would not recommend it as your critical safety communication system. If lives depend on the message, please use the proper safety-rated tools and procedures for your environment. But for day-to-day coordination, it may be useful. On a job site, in a facility, in a store, in a warehouse, or anywhere people need quick back-and-forth communication, Walkie Talkie can reduce some of the friction of calling, texting, or chasing someone down. The point is not that everyone needs it. The point is that Microsoft clearly saw a common category of work where people need simple, fast, hands-free-ish communication and built a tool to support it. So, there you go. We covered a lot today. Planner can reduce task accountability friction. Forms can reduce information gathering friction. Power Automate can reduce repetitive handoff friction. Lists can reduce spreadsheet tracking friction. Bookings can reduce scheduling friction. Loop can reduce messy thinking friction. Shifts can reduce frontline scheduling friction. Stream can reduce training and video knowledge friction. Power BI can reduce metric visibility friction. And Walkie Talkie can reduce quick communication friction. Now, before you go running off to build something in all 10 of them, please remember the golden rule. Everything needs a home. If you create a planner plan, a SharePoint list, a Stream playlist, a Power BI dashboard, or anything else, and then leave it scattered somewhere employees have to hunt for it, you may have added friction instead of removing it. The app is not the solution by itself. The app becomes useful when it is placed in the right part of the work. That usually means asking a few simple questions. Who needs this? When do they need it? What process does it support? Which team or department owns it? Where would a normal employee expect to find it? Those questions matter because navigation friction is real. If people have to search every time they need a tool, a file, a dashboard, or a task list, the system is still too hard. So use these apps, absolutely. Experiment with them. Let them solve specific problems. But do not forget the larger structure. Put these solutions where people would naturally look for them. Most of the time, that means the appropriate team's channel, because the point is not just to create a helpful tool. The point is to make that tool easy to find at the exact moment the work is happening. And with that, I'm going to draw this episode to a close. I hope this helped you see the other Microsoft apps not as a confusing pile of features, but as a set of possible friction reducers. If one of these made you think, wait a minute, we have that problem, then that may be the place to start. And if you build a useful little solution with one of these apps, let me know about it. Nothing makes my day like hearing success stories from listeners. I'll see you next Monday. This is Annie signing off.